Who is the colored man? Is he a king, ruler of empires and gold, conqueror, and holder of God's knowledge? Or is he a slave, forced laborer of land he didn't know and couldn't own, given a new history, void of his own tongue?
The sun kisses my skin, and I ask the Lord to take away my sins. And one day, if I keep praying, the Lord will let me in heaven.
I guess as long as we're young and black, we'll never be safe.
I can't wait for the day when my skin isn't a novelty and our story isn't synonymous with poverty. It's hard to operate in modesty when we always have to deal with this identity dichotomy.
But you don't hear us, though.
Oh, I love that. Hello, and thanks for joining us. The program is Black America. I'm Carol Jenkins. Broadway is back and Broadway is black. It is our pleasure today to have with us Keenan Scott II, playwright of Thoughts of a Colored Man, directed by Steve H. Broadnax III. Now shaking up Broadway, the first Broadway play written, directed, produced, and acted by an all-black cast. And Forrest McClendon, one of the 7 black actors in the cast, who was Tony nominated for his great role in the Scottsboro Boys. And we welcome both of you to Black America.
Thank you for having us.
My producer, Audra West, and I, and even my sister, joined me at the theater to see this. And we were just, blown away by the performances, by the writing, by the message. And Keenan, one of the things that I took away, there's one line there that says, "How do you stop the black man? You kill the black boy." I mean, which, really, truly summed it up for me, for everything that you were trying to, to talk about. And I understand that it took you 15 years to do this, well worth the wait.
Yes, I would say so. I started writing it 15 years ago in undergrad when I was a sophomore, when I was studying acting.
And have embellished it, and it's gotten deeper through the time.
Absolutely.
As I say. So tell us what your intent was. I know that I was tremendously moved by trying to understand and getting a glimpse of 7 black men who all represent different emotions. So talk to us about that.
The original intent was I just wanted to be seen. When I started studying acting in undergrad, that was my first time studying theater. I'm at the age of 18. And when I started studying these, great works in the American theater canon, I wasn't seeing stories that represented myself or my community. And I wanted to create that contemporary story. So really the original idea was I just wanted to be able to write something that I saw myself on stage. And I had a few other black male theater majors in the program with me. It wasn't a lot of us. And I just wanted to write something for us where we could feel like we could hold on to something and we didn't have to change who we were and be unapologetically black, essentially. And that's where the journey kind of started from there.
Yeah, so it's a terrific ensemble of 7 black men representing 7 emotions. So
Thank you.
Lust, I don't know, why did I start with lust? No, happiness. And the others are?
You have love, lust, passion, happiness, depression, anger, and wisdom.
Right. And I am so thrilled that depression is with us today, right?
Yes.
I was happy to see it because you're so adorable in this show. Forrest, talk to us about playing depression and how you made that so, the entire audience was just glued into, the things that you were saying and expressing.
Well, one of the things that was so special to me the moment I read the play, I read the first 25 pages and I knew that I wanted to be a part of it. And it was because of the way that Keenan was using language. And going back to something that you said earlier, this idea of how do you stop the black man, you kill the black boy. One of the things in my storyline that's most important to me is the fact that depression is working really hard to take care of his mother and take care of his younger brother. So one of the great moments that Keenan created for me was the opportunity to explain why someone who's working at Whole Foods and bringing home $700 with rent that's in arrears, why he would be out here in line buying sneakers that cost $220.
I mean, that's such a you know, a chilling moment. So the locations are, you know, the great barbershop scenes are fabulous, the basketball court. Talk to us about the barbershop, because that is, you know, a famous colored man hangout, I want to say. Talk to us, placing so much of the action there.
You know, I really tried to avoid it before that reason, because, you know, we've seen the barbershop in TV shows and movies and things like that. And I wanted to create a scene which that is the only scene except for the end where you see all the men together in the play. Sometimes you see them by themselves, 2, 3, 4 at a time, but that's the first and only time you see all of them together. And when I went through my Rolodex of locations where black men gather,
Right.
The barbershop is the main one. That is a sacred place for all of us. That's a place that all of us go. You know, some of us play sports, but some don't. So therefore, that's a place that some of us may not, you know, commune at. But the barbershop, every one of us commune there. And I thought it was very important to show the dynamic of the barbershop. And I wanted to make a conglomerate of all the types of barbershops I've been in. I've been in barbershops in bad neighborhoods where a lot goes down, you see a lot, but I've also been in barbershops where it was ran by a Christian owner that didn't allow cursing, that had a library for books for kids to read while they sat to get their hair cut. So I wanted to make a conglomerate of that and show the different layers that are in the barbershop, and also show that just because it's known as a sacred place for black men doesn't mean that it's always safe for everyone in the barbershop. So I really wanted to showcase that.
Right, and the interaction between the gay black man, you know, corporate gay black man in that barber shop with the barber, you know, standing up for him. I mean,
Right.
that, you know, that whole scene was incredible.
Yeah, I wanted it to twist. Every time you think you might know what's going to happen, I wanted to kind of twist it and show you something else.
Right. Oh my gosh. So now, Forrest, you've been on Broadway before. I mean, for many of the actors, it's their debut, and it's Keenan's debut.
Yes.
But Scottsboro Boys, I mean, a tremendous experience there. And I was watching over the week after the play some of the teaching videos that you do. I mean, really incredible. Talk to us about your life as an actor, where, you know, you sort of center people on how to get their character.
The most incredible thing to me about my life as an actor is that education is really my message, and theater is pretty much my medium. So I keep one foot on the stage and one foot in the studio pretty much at all times. And so what's special about this show is that I teach at the National Theater Institute, and I teach something called choice work. And long story short, it just means that for every letter of the alphabet from A to Z, I make a different specific choice for the character. A is age, B is birthday, Z is zodiac sign. And what was incredible was the chance to have all of my students come, see this production, to send them my literal choice work, my literal homework, and say, there it is. That, to me, is the homework on stage. I'm trying to preach everything that I literally practice. And so that was just totally full circle in every way.
Just a great videos, and you know, I'm glad you didn't become an electrical engineer. You know, I think that was his. You're lucky, Keenan, that he decided to become an actor.
We are very lucky. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we want to talk about Broadway is Back and Black, and that we say that because we know that we have a full 7 shows that are Black centered, directed, written, and you're saying, Keenan, that it might go up to 9, that we're expecting 2 more?
Yes, I believe so. Jeremy O'Harris with Slave Play, they just went back into previews. They're returning. As we know, they was on Broadway before the pandemic. And I want to say I read somewhere that Adrienne Kennedy is coming and making her debut, the legend that she is.
Right.
So I think that would mean 9.
9. So I don't know, an out-of-body experience, or?
Absolutely. This is something you can't write. You know, like I tell people all the time, is this moment is really hard to quantify. I think it'll be easier once I'm out of the moment and, you know, able to look back and see pictures and see articles and hear the feedback of the people. But for me, I just pride myself on my work. So I'm very much so an artist about my craft, and that's what I focus on. And for me, if I focus on the craft, everything else will fall in place. So it's really something hard to quantify. Being a New Yorker, not even envisioning Broadway, You know, even being from the city and knowing what Broadway is and where it's at, it still seemed like worlds away from me in Queens, you know. It was never really the goal for me because I thought the artist that I was and the stories that I told weren't meant for Broadway. I didn't feel even welcome myself. And I'm grateful that timing has met up with me and everything happens in divine order to end up in this season with so many great playwrights and directors and actors. It's phenomenal. And I really don't have too many words for it.
Yeah. Talk to us about some of the influences, you know, that brought you to this, writing this play, sticking with it for over 15 years. And then I understand that the excitement for the opening was so great that you opened before you were supposed. I mean, I don't think have we heard of that situation before? The play opens before it's expected.
You know, I think it's happened a couple of times. But yes, people were very excited. Our preview runs were going amazing, and we pushed up the preview date to get started. The gentlemen were ready; they were ready to go, and we opened up a little early. But for me, I didn't grow up a theater kid. So for me, I'm very much so a lover of hip hop and its culture. So I'm very influenced by Nasir Jones, which is my favorite MC. I'm very much so inspired by Spike Lee and the characters that he created. Remembering growing up as a kid, his movies were one of the few that I actually saw myself and saw my community. And when I watched Spike Lee joints, those movies made me feel at home, right? Most of his movies are based in New York, and the characters that he created, I knew those characters. I saw those characters in my neighborhood. So Spike Lee.
Me too.
Right.
Yeah.
So Spike Lee and the characters, he's created has had a huge influence on me. As far as literary, Nikki Giovanni, Langston Hughes, Amiri Baraka, big on Gil Scott-Heron.
It's a reading list, folks.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. So I
just giving you a reading list.
I try to stay well read, but those are some of probably my main influences, as well as Shakespeare. Not only did I study Shakespeare acting in college, I studied Shakespeare literature, and I was studying Shakespeare literature during the time of creating this piece, and he has probably had the biggest influence on my playwriting and the styles that I wanted to create and how I wanted to tell my stories.
Right, and Forrest, you saw a similarity to Shakespeare in all of this as well. Talk to us about that.
I want to be so clear. My first line in this play is in iambic pentameter. And one of the things I appreciated about this process is that Steve Broadnax, our director, talks a lot more about principles than rules. And I think that one of the things that happens in the academy is this idea of rules. Yeah. So if you're going to do a play in iambic pentameter, then the play has to be in iambic pentameter. And I think that what I see in this 21st century play is the opposite of that. Keenan has been influenced by so many things. And it's as if the play is a great vehicle for allowing all of that to literally come through. And that's what I think is so magical about this moment of responsibility as I look at it, that what we saw in the middle of the pandemic was the American theater divide in many ways. The institutions closed down, the industry closed down while the institutions remained open. And so our training programs that are preparing actors to literally be on Broadway, we're preparing them to be part of an industry that acknowledged it was racist and ableist and sexist. So we had to look at the way that we were training people to be a part of that. So what we're waiting for in colleges and universities and conservatories literally is plays exactly like this one for young people to see themselves and to be able to tell stories that reflect their own experiences.
And really, to piggyback off what Forrest just said, that also goes back to what my original intent was. I didn't write this play early on to say, I'm going to make it to Broadway with this piece. I wanted it to do exactly what Forrest just said. I wanted to create something that Black creatives can take hold on to and call their own, and have something in the American theater canon that was for them. It wasn't the Black version. It wasn't the one or two Black characters in the piece. It was written and created for them, and I wrote it in a way to where after Broadway, it could be done anywhere in any way. So if it's done, it could be based in Chicago. It could be based in South LA. It could be based in Detroit. It doesn't necessarily have to be centered in New York. If your city or your town is experiencing urban renewal, gentrification, this play can be set there. And through the journey of this piece and working with a lot of different actors, realizing that the shared experiences of Black men in America run very deep. So regardless of where we grow up, there's a lot of shared experiences that we have, and that's been a great experience for me through this piece. So my intent was for this really to live and flourish in an educational space, because I knew there were college kids like myself, which it has changed in 15, 16 years, that there weren't contemporary work that we saw ourselves in. So I wanted to create that so it can kind of stay in the ether of, American education for young Black artists to have.
Sure, and I'm sure it will appear in all of those places too.
That's the goal.
And I love the mix of the slam, the hip hop, all of those, really cultural defining things that are in the play. And as you say, not as an afterthought, but as central, to the telling of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Forrest said, I'm influenced by a lot of things, and I really wanted to, which I now call slam narrative, which is the genre that I feel Thoughts of a Color Man is in, where I fuse the use of slam poetry, spoken word, prose, traditional dialogue. I'm very much so influenced by African folklore, so my storytelling is circular. It doesn't really have a beginning and end, so to speak, and I think the show showcases that, because it starts with the sunrise and ends with a sunset. But as we know, that's a circular movement. So that's how I also write, and that's what African folklore is. So I'm influenced by all those things, and really I just wanted to put all the things that I love into a pot and create something new.
You sure did, and the audience was over the moon about the whole thing, and I love that it was a Black audience. So often when, you go to, a play, even if it is about Black people, there are a few in the audience, but this was terrific. I even walked to the back, just to make sure. I mean, everybody was riveted, and almost everybody was Black, so congratulations on that. I do want to talk about the barriers, though, to this, to getting a show up on Broadway. One of the things that struck me when I was in the theater and reading the program, to see your list of producers, which is very long, and Cheryl Lee Ralphie, actor, singer, is one of your producers. Yes. Many women who have, put into putting this play up. But the other thing, in reading about, I had no idea that the SEC is involved in determining who can produce a play, who can put money, into a play. Forrest, and you've got this great idea of how it's possible to bring. We know that there are plenty of Black people who can do that, but who have not actually come to Broadway yet. But, just the idea the SEC determines who can invest.
Well, in a nutshell, I think it's the idea of high risk. And Broadway is really, really high risk. And so it's super important that the individuals that are involved in it can afford to be a part of that kind of risk. And so the SEC is, I think, going to show up anywhere where you see that type of thing happening. But what I think we see in this play is an idea of breaking down barriers, both above the title, below the deck, and behind the scenes, and in the front of the house. And so when you bring in, at the investor level, more people of color, then you see more directors of color, more writers of color, more actors of color. And so I think the pipeline begins to radically shift in that regard. But in terms of a production like this, if people can't meet the buy-in at $1 million, in a nutshell, there can be other ways that those, especially people of color who want to invest in Broadway shows, there are other avenues. And I think that this play is a big part of making that happen.
Right, and Keenan, you're determined to do that, right? To reach out to Black investors and producers, because then, the beauty of your show is how thoroughly, Blackness seeps through everything, every single aspect of it.
Absolutely, and it's sometimes strange, and it seems so novel that it is that, but I wrote myself, I wrote my family, I wrote my community, so I had no choice but to do that. And I think a lot of times as Black creatives, we're stifled and put into a box and made to feel that we only have to create a certain way because we should write for the white gaze, with the intention
Exactly,
that our
exactly.
audiences are going to be white. And I don't write from that space. I don't write from that lens. I write from my lens. And I am culturally black to the fullest. And that's what my work portrays. I show us in the good, bad, and ugly, right? It's not about creating perfect characters or a perfect story. It's about creating beautifully flawed human beings and allowing people to see themselves in that, whether it's a black man, black woman, white woman, white man, etc. I created a piece where people can see their humanity in, because it's not just a play that says, hey, if you're not a black man, you can't relate to this. It's a play about humanity, right? It's a play about
It is.
love
It
and
is
joy.
indeed. And that's why so many
yeah.
women were enjoying it. you know.
Absolutely.
I think the women may have enjoyed it. Maybe they were just more effusive than
Maybe-
in this
maybe.
audience, but they were totally,
No, women, especially black women. I was raised by black women, raised by a village of black women. So since my origins, black women have created and uplifted me and given me love and showed me how to love and care. So it's very important for me when women come and see my piece and be able to maybe even have a new perspective on their loved ones or their lover. So it's very important. And I think women do respond to the piece in a very deep way, because as black men, and we know what our plight is, it's hard to be able to be our full selves.
Yeah, talk about the plight a little bit, and what you hope will change because of, this, depression, Forrest. Talk about, because that is, I don't know that we actually connect that to black men, that concept. So it was revelatory when you talked about your having to care for your sick mother and and when you think, yeah, that's a lot of responsibility. And here's a guy who could have done something else, and he's working in the supermarket.
Yeah, I'd say two things about that. The first being that as we continue developing the play, and in particular coming to Broadway, I did some research in terms of different types of depression, because I wanted to really zero in on what I feel like Dee is experiencing. And it turns out that it's situational depression. It's the kind of depression that comes from having had a tremendous amount of promise and literally having a dream
Right.
that is not only completely deferred, but virtually destroyed. And as we were saying earlier, the kind of responsibility that he literally has to tend to. And the second thing that I would say is that when we did the first workshop here in New York, I invited a friend of mine, a white woman around my age, because one of the things that's important to me is that it is very much a play about black men, and it is called Thoughts of a Colored Man. But I did want to understand what that perspective would be from a white woman specifically. And one of the things she talked about when she saw that first workshop was, she said, I don't quite see the depression, because again, he was so funny.
Right.
And she was laughing so much. She said, when I'm depressed, I lay on the couch and I literally can't move. And I said, that's the story I think Keenan is telling.
Right.
That here's someone who doesn't get to lay on the couch and doesn't have access, if you will, to even the kind of healthcare,
Sure.
the kind of psychological and emotional support. So that's one of the things that I think is most incredible about the play, shining a light really on depression for black men, especially depression that is situational in this country.
Yeah, I think
Absolutely.
it was a major contribution.
Thank
and
you.
all of the other names, too, the man struggling with fatherhood, there is so much in here and what's the impact that, not everyone is going to be able to get to the theater, to see this, but the word of mouth will get out about it. But
Absolutely.
and I think just the thought process of thinking about black men, in this varied way, as opposed to just in one way.
Right. I think at the core of all of my work, I want to build empathy. And I want audience members to leave with more empathy than what they came. And my goal was to show that black men weren't monolithic. We were not the stereotypes and tropes that we have to carry throughout our lives. And that's what this play is dispelling.
Right, and for you, Forrest, in terms of your character, as I keep saying, he's so adorable. It's like, I'm gonna adopt you too. But just this character is you just want to hug him, right?
That is the most special thing that I think I've heard a number of people say to me. They're like, literally, can I just hug you for a sec? And girl, I think that that's so much the moment that we're in. We've been so disconnected as a result of COVID over the last 18 years. So one of the weird things is being back on Broadway, standing at the barricade, not being able to wrap your arms around people who've flown across the country
Right.
to literally see the play.
Right.
I think we are desperately in need of a hug in a nutshell. And so I think that I hope a lot of people will take that away with them.
Right, right. Well, Keenan, thank you so much
thank
for,
you.
for,
Thank
for
you.
writing all of this Shakespearean slam narrative
Narrative, yes. See, there you go.
piece of theater, and thank you, Forrest, for for being in it. I think you guys are going to be there for a long time. So
Thank you. That's
From
So-
your mouth.
to God's ears, right.
Well, thank you so much to Keenan Scott II and Forrest McClendon of Thoughts of a Colored Man, the Broadway sensation at the Golden Theater. Do go see it. Tickets on sale through March 13th, but of course it's going to be there a long time, but get there first. And as I said in the opening, Broadway is back and Broadway is black. Thanks for joining us. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we'll see you the next time.